Why are you still pretending you don't feel it? That question may have followed you for years. Maybe nobody ever said it to you out loud. Maybe it appeared in your mind late at night, when the noise of the world finally disappeared and you were left alone with yourself. Why do you feel different? Why can you walk into a room and immediately sense that something is wrong, even while everyone else is smiling? Why have some of the hardest battles of your life seem to arrive one after another? Why have you lost people you thought would stay forever? Why have strangers trusted you with secrets they had never told anyone else? Why have you always felt that your life was supposed to mean something more? And perhaps the strangest question of all, why, after everything you have survived, is there still a voice inside you whispering, "You haven't even begun yet"? You tried to ignore that voice. You told yourself you were imagining things. You tried to become normal. You tried to want what everyone else wanted. You tried to follow the path that had already been prepared for you. Study, work, earn, consume, smile, repeat. You tried to convince yourself that this was enough. But every time you almost succeeded, something inside you rebelled. A quiet discomfort, a strange restlessness, a feeling that you were wearing clothes that belonged to someone else. And eventually, life began removing the things you were using to hide from that feeling. People disappeared. Plans failed. Doors closed. Relationships changed. Versions of yourself died. And what you first thought was destruction may have actually been preparation. Because sometimes, when a person is meant to walk a different path, life cannot allow them to remain comfortable on the wrong one. Sometimes the road has to collapse behind you before you finally stop trying to return. If you have ever wondered whether you were made for something different, pay attention. Not because someone else can give you a certificate telling you that you are special. Not because being chosen means being better than everyone around you. It doesn't. If anything, the path of a chosen person often feels harder, more confusing, more lonely, and far more demanding. Being chosen is not about superiority. It is about responsibility. And there are certain patterns that appear again and again in the lives of people who feel called toward something greater than themselves. 9 signs, 9 doors, and the final one may explain why everything else happened. So stay with me until the end, because by the time we reach the 9th sign, you may see your entire life differently. The first sign appeared long before you understood what it meant. You simply knew that pretending exhausted you. You remember being surrounded by people laughing about something you didn't find funny. Everyone joined in. You smiled for a moment because that was what people were supposed to do. But inside, something tightened. You felt almost physically uncomfortable. And you wondered, how can everyone act like this is normal? That feeling followed you into friendships, relationships, workplaces, family gatherings. You could tolerate disagreement. You could tolerate someone being imperfect. You could even forgive mistakes. But there was one thing you could never comfortably tolerate: fakeness. Someone could be charming. They could smile perfectly. They could say exactly the right words. Everyone else might adore them. Yet something inside you would whisper, "Be careful." Sometimes you had no evidence, no logical explanation, nothing you could show another person. So you ignored yourself. And later, you discovered that the smile had been hiding something. The friendship had an agenda. The compliment contained jealousy. The promise meant nothing. Eventually you started wondering how you kept sensing these things before they happened. Here is the first sign. You cannot comfortably live behind a mask. And because you struggle to fake yourself, you become unusually sensitive to the masks worn by others. Think about your life. How many times have you walked away from an opportunity because something about it felt wrong? Other people may have called you foolish. You're overthinking. You're too sensitive. You should just play the game. But playing games has never come naturally to you. You would rather lose honestly than win by becoming someone you cannot respect. That has cost you things. Maybe money. Maybe popularity. Maybe relationships. Maybe opportunities. But somewhere beneath the disappointment, you kept something more valuable. Yourself. And there were moments when you almost traded that away. There was probably a time when you tried desperately to fit in. You changed the way you spoke, the way you dressed, the things you admitted liking. You laughed at conversations that bored you. You stayed quiet when something bothered you. You made yourself smaller because you believed acceptance required sacrifice. And for a while, it worked. People accepted the version of you that you created for them. But there was a problem. You didn't. One night, perhaps after another meaningless conversation or another situation where you betrayed your own instincts, you looked at yourself and realized something terrifying. You were surrounded by people, and completely alone. That is when the mask began to crack. And once you discover how painful it is to betray yourself, authenticity stops being a preference. It becomes survival. This is why dishonest environments drain you faster than they drain other people. It is why gossip bothers you. Why manipulation makes you uncomfortable. Why arrogance is exhausting. Why people obsessed only with appearances, status, possessions, or control can make you feel strangely empty. You are not necessarily judging them. You simply cannot remain connected to something your spirit experiences as false. And sometimes that ability makes people uncomfortable. Because a person wearing a mask does not always fear someone who attacks them. They fear someone who can see them. You may not say a word. You may remain polite. You may never confront them. But somehow they sense that you notice more than you reveal. And that brings us to the second sign. Because once you stop pretending, another problem begins. You start realizing that the life everyone told you to chase does not satisfy you. There was probably a moment when you looked around and wondered, is this really it? Wake up, rush, work, pay bills, buy things, scroll, sleep, repeat. Then do it again tomorrow, and again next week, and again next year. Maybe you felt guilty for questioning it. You saw people who seemed perfectly satisfied. They wanted predictable routines, familiar places, a safe path. Nothing wrong with that. But something inside you refused to sleep. You wanted more. Not necessarily more money, not more attention, not more possessions. Something deeper. Meaning, purpose, discovery. You wanted to know what life could become if you stopped living according to fear. And this created a strange tension inside you. Part of you wanted security. Another part wanted freedom. Part of you wanted approval. Another part wanted truth. Part of you wanted to remain where everything was familiar. But another voice kept whispering, there is something beyond this. This is the second sign. You have a hunger that ordinary success cannot completely satisfy. You might reach a goal and feel happy for a moment. Then the question returns. What now? You might buy something you wanted for months. The excitement fades. What now? You might receive the approval you thought you needed. It feels good briefly. Then the emptiness returns. What now? Because what you actually hunger for cannot be purchased. You hunger for expansion. You hunger for understanding. You hunger for a life that feels alive. And at some point, life probably placed you at a crossroads. One road looked safe. Everyone understood it. Your family approved. Your friends could explain it. You could predict where it led. The second road made almost no sense. It was uncertain, lonely, possibly dangerous. And yet when you looked toward it, something inside you woke up. Most people would have chosen certainty. Maybe you did too, at first. Maybe you walked several miles down the safe road. But every step felt heavier, until one day you realized something. A safe life that destroys your spirit is not actually safe. So you turned around. That decision may have confused everyone. Why would you leave? Why would you change? Why would you start again? Why would you risk everything? Because they could see what you were leaving. They could not feel what was calling you. There are paths in life that cannot be explained before they are walked. And you may be one of the people who was never meant to live entirely according to someone else's map. But choosing another road comes with a price. Which leads us to the third sign. Your life has tested you more than you think it should have. There may have been periods when you genuinely wondered how much more you could take. You solved one problem. Another appeared. You recovered from one heartbreak. Another betrayal came. You rebuilt yourself. Something collapsed again. You watched other people move smoothly through seasons that seemed to destroy you. And you asked the universe, "Why me? Why did you have to learn everything the painful way? Why did you have to lose people? Why did you have to experience rejection? Why did you have to become strong when all you wanted was somewhere safe enough to be weak? Perhaps you were forced to grow up too quickly. Maybe you became responsible before you were ready. Maybe people disappointed you when you needed them most. Maybe you had to encourage yourself because nobody else understood what you were fighting. And there were nights when you almost gave up. Not dramatically. Quietly. The kind of giving up where you stop expecting good things. Where you stop trusting people. Where you tell yourself you no longer care because caring has become too painful. But something strange kept happening. Morning came. And you continued. Broken? Sometimes. Confused? Absolutely. But still moving. That is the third sign. Your struggles did not simply hurt you. They trained you. Look at the person you were before some of your hardest experiences. Now look at yourself. You notice things faster. You understand pain differently. You recognize manipulation sooner. You appreciate peace more deeply. You know the difference between someone saying, "I understand," and someone who truly does. That wisdom was expensive. You paid for it with experience. Imagine a person trapped inside a dark room. Someone who has never entered that room can stand outside and shout instructions. Just find the door. Think positively. Stop being afraid. But another person who has been trapped there before enters differently. They know where the sharp edges are. They remember which walls lead nowhere. They know how terrifying the darkness feels. And because they survived it themselves, they can say, "Take my hand. I know the way out." That may be one reason your journey has been difficult. Not because you were abandoned. Not because every hardship was somehow magically good. Pain is still pain. Loss is still loss. But pain can become knowledge. And knowledge can become service. One day, Someone may survive because you can explain a darkness they thought nobody understood. Your heartbreak may teach you how to recognize someone else's silent suffering. Your rejection may allow you to comfort someone who feels worthless. Your failure may become the exact story another person needs before trying again. The scar becomes a map, and suddenly something that once seemed meaningless becomes useful. You begin to understand. I survived something, I can now help someone else survive. That realization changes pain. It doesn't erase it. It transforms it. And strangely, this may already be happening. People come to you. They tell you things. Sometimes people you barely know reveal their deepest fears, their relationship problems, their secrets, their dreams, their regrets, and halfway through the conversation, they suddenly stop and say, "I don't know why I'm telling you this, but perhaps you do." Some people feel safe around someone who has walked through fire without becoming fire. Which brings us to the fourth sign. You have always searched for truth. Even as a child, because I said so, probably wasn't enough for you. You wanted to know why. Why do people behave this way? Why do we believe this? Why should I want that? Why does everyone follow this rule? Who decided it? What happens if the majority is wrong? That curiosity occasionally got you into trouble. People may have called you difficult, stubborn, too intense, too philosophical. You asked questions at moments when others preferred comfortable silence, and eventually you discovered something important. Many people do not actually want truth. They want reassurance. They want confirmation. They want information that protects the world they already believe in. But you were never completely satisfied with that. Even when the truth hurt, some part of you preferred painful truth to comforting illusion. And your search eventually changed direction. At first, you looked outside yourself. Books, teachers, religion, philosophy, psychology, science, history, other people's experiences. Every answer opened another door. Every door revealed another question, until you encountered the most difficult mystery of all, yourself. Why do certain things trigger you? Why do you repeatedly choose certain people? What are you afraid of? Which dreams are actually yours? Which beliefs did you inherit without examining them? What would remain if you removed every identity the world gave you? Your job, your social role, your reputation, your possessions, your relationships. Who are you beneath all of that? That question frightens people because eventually it demands change. Once you see yourself clearly, you cannot comfortably return to unconscious living. You begin catching yourself in your own lies. I'm fine. No, you aren't. I don't care. Yes, you do. I've moved on. Not yet. This is what I want. Or is it what you were taught to want? Truth begins cutting away every false version of you. And at first, it feels like losing yourself. Later, you realize you were losing everything that was preventing you from meeting yourself. This is why solitude may have become so important to you. You can enjoy people. You can love deeply. But you also need moments when nobody else's voice is entering your mind. You need silence. Because silence is often where your real thoughts finally become loud enough to hear. And in that silence, you may have discovered something you had suspected your entire life. You were different. Which brings us to the fifth sign. You have often felt like the black sheep. Maybe you love your family deeply. Maybe they love you too. Yet somehow, when everyone gathers around the same table, You occasionally feel like a visitor from another world. They see life one way. You see another. They value things you cannot understand. You question things they consider obvious. When everyone walks right, something inside you wants to know what is on the left. And sometimes this difference has been painful. You wanted to belong. Of course you did. Every human being wants somewhere they can remove their armor. You wanted to be understood without constantly explaining yourself. But instead you may have been labeled the strange one, the sensitive one, the dreamer, the rebel, the one who thinks too much, the one who refuses to settle. And perhaps you spent years believing something was wrong with you. You looked at everyone else and thought, why can't I just be like them? So you tried. You swallowed opinions. You lowered your ambitions. You stopped talking about certain dreams because people laughed. You avoided subjects that made others uncomfortable. You attempted to become easier to understand. But each time you abandoned your uniqueness to gain belonging, the same emptiness returned. Because belonging bought with self-betrayal is only another kind of loneliness. Eventually something shifted. Maybe it happened after a major argument. Maybe after leaving home. Maybe after someone told you that your dream was unrealistic. You stopped asking, why am I not like them? And started asking, what if I was never supposed to be? That question changed everything. The black sheep is not always the broken member of the family. Sometimes the black sheep is the pattern breaker, the one who looks at generations of behavior and says, it ends with me. Maybe your family avoided difficult conversations. You learned to speak. Maybe they remained in unhealthy relationships. You decided love should not require self-destruction. Maybe everyone lived according to fear. You chose uncertainty. Maybe nobody had ever pursued the kind of future you wanted. So there was no map, no example, no person to call for instructions. You had to become the first. And being first is lonely. The first person walking through a forest has to cut branches. The second person receives a path. You may not always see the reward of becoming different. Sometimes your purpose is simply to make difference possible for the person who comes after you. That child watching you. That younger sibling. That friend. That stranger who sees your courage from a distance. They may one day choose freedom because you showed them it existed. But being different creates another test. People may hurt you, misunderstand you, use you, and somehow, despite everything, you continue trying to remain good. That is the sixth sign. There were moments when kindness cost you. You gave people chances they did not deserve. You answered calls you should have ignored. You helped people who disappeared when you needed them. You forgave apologies that were never followed by changed behavior. You listened for hours to people who could barely give you 5 minutes. You stayed because you saw potential. You believed promises because your own promises meant something to you. And eventually you learned one of the hardest lessons a generous person can learn. Not everyone loves the way you love. That realization hurt, perhaps more than the betrayal itself, because you were not only grieving what happened, you were grieving the person you believed they were. After enough disappointment, you had every reason to become cold, and maybe for a while, you did. You built walls. You told yourself nobody would ever get close enough to hurt you again. You began expecting betrayal before trust even had a chance. But living behind those walls became another prison. So eventually you made a more difficult choice. You decided to remain kind without remaining naive. That distinction changed your life. Kindness does not mean unlimited access. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. Love does not mean tolerating disrespect. Helping people does not require destroying yourself. A pure heart still needs boundaries. In fact, without boundaries, generosity becomes exhaustion. And perhaps this was one of your greatest lessons. You were not being asked to stop giving. You were being taught where to give. You were not being asked to stop loving. You were learning how to love without abandoning yourself. Because there are people who will interpret kindness as weakness. They will keep taking as long as you continue offering. And when you finally say no, they may accuse you of changing. They are correct. You changed. You learned that being a good person does not require volunteering as someone else's victim. And after learning that, your kindness became stronger. Before, you helped because you were afraid of disappointing people. Now you help because you choose to. Before, you said yes because you feared rejection. Now your yes has meaning because you have learned to say no. Before, you gave hoping someone would finally value you. Now you understand your value before anyone gives you permission to possess it. That is growth. And despite everything, you still care. Someone else's pain still affects you. You still want people to win. You still feel genuine joy when someone you love succeeds. You still stop for the person nobody else notices. You still recognize sadness hiding behind a smile. And sometimes you give people hope without even realizing it. Perhaps someone remembers a sentence you forgot saying. Perhaps you encouraged somebody at the exact moment they were preparing to give up. Perhaps your presence changed a day you thought was ordinary. That is the strange thing about light. The person carrying it does not always see where it reaches. But there is a seventh sign that goes even deeper. It is almost impossible to explain. You simply know. There is something inside you that has always known your life has another layer. You might call it intuition, a calling, an inner voice, God, the universe, conscience, destiny. Whatever language you use, you recognize the feeling. It appears when everything outside you says one thing and everything inside says another. You have probably ignored it before. Everyone has. Maybe you had a feeling about a person and stayed anyway. Maybe something told you not to take a certain path. You ignored it. Then later you whispered, "I knew it." How did you know? You couldn't explain. You just did. This inner knowing is not always dramatic. Usually, it is quiet. Fear screams. Intuition whispers. Fear gives you 20 reasons. Intuition gives you one sentence. Go. Stay. Call them. Don't trust this. Try again. Leave. Wait. And the more you ignore that voice, the more confusing life becomes. But the more you learn to listen, the more you begin noticing strange moments of alignment. You think of someone. They call. You ask a question privately. A conversation later that day seems to answer it. A door closes and you are devastated. Months later you discover what would have happened if it had opened. You lose something you thought you needed. Later you realize the loss redirected you toward something better suited to who you were becoming. At first, you call these coincidences. Then too many happen, and you start paying attention. Not obsessively. Not believing every random event is a supernatural message. But noticing that life sometimes communicates through patterns. Through timing. Through repetition. Through the uncomfortable feeling that appears before certain decisions. You start realizing that perhaps guidance is not always a booming voice from the sky. Sometimes it is the persistent truth inside you that refuses to disappear. And perhaps the deepest part of you has known for years. You are supposed to do something. You may not know exactly what yet. That is what frustrates you. You can feel the calling without seeing the entire destination. It is like standing on a dark road with a lantern that only illuminates the next few steps. You want the whole map. Life gives you enough light for one decision, and asks, "Do you trust me enough to move?" That may be why you have frequently felt older than your age. Not physically, internally. Conversations that entertain other people sometimes feel empty to you. Certain conflicts seem pointless. The endless competition. The obsession with proving who is better. Who owns more? Who has more followers? Who received more attention? You look at all of it and think, we are alive for such a short time. Is this really what we are doing with it? And sometimes that thought creates a homesickness you cannot explain. Not homesickness for a city, not for a building, for something you cannot name. A place where things make sense. A feeling of peace. A sense that you belong somewhere you cannot remember. Maybe you have looked at the stars and experienced that strange sensation. For a second, the world becomes quiet, and something inside you says, "There is more." You cannot prove it, but you feel it, and that inner knowing becomes especially important because of the eighth sign. Some people dislike you for reasons you never understand. You have probably experienced it. You enter a situation with good intentions. You are respectful. You do nothing obviously wrong. Yet someone immediately becomes cold toward you. Maybe they criticize everything you do. Maybe they compete with you even though you never entered a competition. Maybe they spread rumors. Maybe they try to embarrass you. Maybe they interpret your confidence as arrogance and your silence as weakness. And you spend days wondering, what did I do? Sometimes the answer is nothing. But be careful here. Not every person who dislikes you is jealous. Not every criticism is an attack. And being spiritual does not mean assuming everyone who disagrees with you is somehow dark. Sometimes we are wrong. Sometimes we hurt people. Sometimes we need correction. Wisdom requires enough humility to examine ourselves. But there are also moments when another person's reaction truly has more to do with what is happening inside them than with anything you did. Your freedom can threaten someone who abandoned theirs. Your confidence can irritate someone who depends entirely on approval. Your boundaries can anger someone who benefited from you having none. Your growth can make someone uncomfortable because it reminds them that they have been standing still. Your authenticity can disturb people who survive through performance. You do not have to attack darkness for light to reveal it. Turn on a lamp in a messy room, and suddenly everything that was hidden becomes visible. The lamp did not create the mess. It revealed it. And this may explain certain relationships from your past. When you were insecure, certain people loved being around you. When you started healing, they changed. When you said yes to everything, you were amazing. When you developed boundaries, suddenly you were selfish. When you doubted yourself, they were comfortable. When you finally recognized your value, they accused you of thinking you were better than them. Your transformation changed the agreement. And some people only liked the old version of you because that version was easier to control. That hurts, especially when it comes from people you love. But growth eventually teaches you that not every relationship is designed to survive every version of you. Some people belong to chapters. You keep trying to drag them into the next one because you confuse history with destiny. But the next chapter requires different characters, different conversations, different standards, different energy. And sometimes life removes people not because they were evil, but because the road divided. Their direction changed. Yours changed. The season ended. You can bless the memory without rebuilding the prison. And when you finally stop chasing everyone who leaves, something remarkable happens. You create room for people who recognize you without requiring you to shrink. But we have reached the 9th sign now. And this is the sign that ties everything together. The authenticity, the hunger for more, the battles, the search for truth, the feeling of being different, the kindness, the intuition, the rejection. All of it points toward one final realization. Deep down, you believe your life belongs to something greater than your ego. You may call that greater presence God. You may call it divine intelligence. You may call it the universe. You may simply call it a higher power. But somewhere along the road, you stopped believing that you were completely alone. Maybe it happened during your worst moment, when nobody knew how badly you were struggling, when your plans had failed, when a relationship ended, when money was disappearing, when you were lying awake at 3 in the morning with no idea what tomorrow would look like, and still, somehow, you made it through. Think about that. There were moments you were certain would destroy you. They did not. There were doors you begged to open. They stayed closed. Later you thanked God they did. There were people you thought you could not live without. You are living. There were versions of your future you thought you needed. They disappeared. And somehow, another future began forming. How many times have you been protected by something that first looked like rejection? How many times has a delay prevented you from entering the wrong situation? How many times has losing control forced you toward the exact lesson you needed? You begin looking backward and seeing a pattern. Not every event makes sense. Some losses remain painful. Some questions remain unanswered. Faith is not pretending everything is easy. Faith is continuing even when you cannot see the full picture. And gradually, you begin understanding what being chosen may actually mean. It does not mean you are selected to sit above humanity. It means you are called to serve within it, to become more conscious, more compassionate, more courageous, to bring something into the world that would not exist in exactly the same way without you. Maybe that thing is enormous. Maybe millions of people will see it. Maybe nobody will ever know your name. Purpose is not measured by fame. The person who raises one child with love may change generations. The friend who refuses to abandon someone in their darkest season may save a life. The teacher who believes in one forgotten student may redirect an entire future. The artist who creates something honest may make a stranger feel less alone. The person who breaks one destructive family pattern may change descendants they will never meet. Light does not ask how many people are watching before it shines. It simply shines. And perhaps that is your mission. Not to convince everyone that you are chosen. A truly chosen person does not need to announce it. Their life demonstrates it. Through discipline, through compassion, through courage, through what they do when nobody is watching, through the way they treat people who cannot offer them anything, through the way they continue after disappointment, through the way they choose integrity when dishonesty would be easier, through the way they transform pain instead of transmitting it. Because this is where many people misunderstand the path. They want the title. They want to hear, "You are special." They want protection without responsibility, purpose without sacrifice, transformation without discomfort. But imagine being given a lamp in a dark place. The lamp is not merely a reward. Now you have a responsibility to use it. Once you can see, you cannot pretend you are blind. Once you heal, you become responsible for what you do with your wounds. Once you learn, you become responsible for how you live. Once you recognize the truth, returning to the old lie becomes a conscious choice. That is the burden and beauty of awakening. And maybe that is why your path has felt so intense. You were being prepared for a version of yourself you had not yet met. Every difficult chapter was asking you a question. Will rejection make you bitter or stronger? Will betrayal make you cruel or wise? Will loneliness make you desperate or self-aware? Will success make you arrogant or useful? Will failure make you quit or evolve? Will pain pass through you and become pain for someone else? Or will it end with you? That last question matters, because perhaps the greatest evidence that you are walking toward your purpose is not that life stops hurting you. It is that you stop using your pain as permission to hurt others. You become the person you once needed. Think about the younger version of you, the one who was confused, the one who wanted someone to say, "You're not crazy for feeling different," the one who wanted someone to believe in the dream, the one who felt rejected, the one who gave too much, the one who stayed too long, the one who questioned everything, the one who cried where nobody could see. Imagine standing in front of that person now. What would they think of you? They might notice your scars first, then your strength. They might ask, "Did we make it?" And maybe you would smile, not because everything became perfect, but because you finally understand the answer. We're still making it. Because being chosen does not mean reaching a moment where every question disappears. It means accepting the journey. You keep learning. You keep failing. You keep correcting yourself. You keep listening. You keep walking. And sometimes, just when you think you understand your path, another door opens. That is exactly what makes the next part of your life so important. Everything before this moment has already happened. You cannot change it. You cannot return and prevent every betrayal. You cannot recover every wasted year. You cannot force someone to apologize. You cannot rewrite childhood. You cannot make the people who misunderstood you suddenly understand. But you can decide what everything becomes. Pain can become bitterness, or wisdom. Rejection can become insecurity, or independence. Loneliness can become emptiness, or self-knowledge. Failure can become shame, or instruction. The meaning of your past is not determined only by what happened. It is also determined by what you build from it. And maybe that is why you are hearing this message now. Not because this video magically appeared to tell you that you are better than everyone else, but because perhaps you needed a reminder. You have been waiting for permission. Permission to leave what no longer fits. Permission to trust your instincts. Permission to stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Permission to pursue something larger. Permission to create boundaries. Permission to begin again. Permission to believe that your past did not disqualify you from your future. But what if nobody is coming to give you that permission? What if the next chapter begins the moment you give it to yourself? There is something you need to understand about destiny. People imagine destiny as a destination guaranteed to arrive. But maybe destiny behaves more like a door. The door can appear. The opportunity can arrive. The calling can whisper. But you still have to turn the handle. You still have to walk. You can receive signs for years and remain exactly where you are. You can recognize every one of these 9 signs and still choose fear. The signs are not the journey. They are invitations. Your authenticity is an invitation to stop performing. Your hunger is an invitation to explore. Your suffering is an invitation to transform. Your curiosity is an invitation to seek truth. Your difference is an invitation to create a new path. Your kindness is an invitation to serve wisely. Your intuition is an invitation to listen. Your rejection is an invitation to stop depending on universal approval. And your faith is an invitation to trust what you cannot yet see. But an invitation ignored eventually becomes regret. Imagine yourself many years from now, older, quieter, looking backward across your life. There is one question you will not want to ask. What would have happened if I had trusted myself? What if you started? What if you left? What if you created? What if you spoke? What if you tried? What if you finally became the person you kept postponing? Fear will always give you reasons to wait. Wait until you have more money. Wait until you know more. Wait until people support you. Wait until you feel confident. Wait until the timing is perfect. But confidence often comes after action. Clarity often comes after movement. And perfect timing is sometimes just fear wearing a watch. Maybe the step you need to take is small. Send the message. Write the first page. Start the channel. Apply. Walk away. Say no. Say yes. Forgive. Ask for help. Pray. Learn. Rest. Begin again. Your entire life does not have to change tonight. But your direction can. A ship can travel thousands of miles because of a tiny change in direction. Your future can change because of one decision repeated long enough. And perhaps this is the moment when you finally stop asking, "Why did all of this happen to me?" and begin asking, "What can I do with everything I have learned?" That is the turning point. The victim asks only why. The awakened person eventually asks what now, not because they deny what happened, but because they refuse to allow what happened to own what happens next. Your story has chapters you would never choose to reread, but those chapters are not the ending. And somebody watching this right now needs to hear that. You have mistaken exhaustion for completion. You are tired, so you think your story is over. It isn't. You are disappointed, so you think the promise disappeared. It didn't. You are alone, so you think you have been forgotten. You haven't. Some seasons are quiet because roots grow underground. Nobody applauds roots. Nobody sees them. But without them, the tree falls during the first storm. Maybe this season is building roots. Maybe you are learning discipline, patience, discernment, self-respect, faith. Maybe nothing outside you appears to be happening because something inside you is being rebuilt. And when the opportunity finally arrives, you will understand why the old version of you could not have handled it. There is one more thing you should know. Being chosen does not mean you will always feel powerful. Sometimes you will feel completely lost. There will be days when you question everything you believe. There will be mornings when motivation disappears. There will be people whose departure still hurts. There will be prayers that appear unanswered. There will be moments when you fall back into old patterns. That does not mean the journey ended. Growth is not a straight line. Sometimes you revisit an old lesson at a deeper level. Sometimes you think you are being punished when you are actually being shown what still needs healing. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit, "I don't know." A person driven by ego needs to appear certain. A person committed to truth can remain teachable. That may be the real test. Can you believe you have a purpose without believing you are above correction? Can you recognize your gifts without worshipping your ego? Can you trust your intuition while still questioning your assumptions? Can you be kind while maintaining boundaries? Can you be strong without becoming hard? Can you shine without needing everyone to watch? If you can, then perhaps you are beginning to understand the responsibility behind the word chosen. You were not chosen to escape humanity. You were chosen to become more fully human, to feel deeply without drowning, to love without disappearing, to speak truth without becoming cruel, to become powerful without becoming controlling, to succeed without forgetting compassion, to walk through darkness without carrying darkness into every room you enter. And this is where the story returns to the question we began with. Why are you still pretending you don't feel it? You feel the calling. You have felt it for years. Maybe you buried it beneath responsibilities. Maybe other people convinced you it was unrealistic. Maybe you failed once and decided failure meant the dream was wrong. Maybe you became comfortable. Maybe you became afraid. But the voice never completely disappeared. It waited. Through every relationship, every job, every move, every disappointment, every reinvention. It kept whispering, "There is more." And now you understand why. The first sign taught you that you cannot live falsely. The second showed you that ordinary comfort cannot silence your hunger. The third revealed that your battles were building strength and wisdom. The fourth showed you why you have always questioned the surface of life. The fifth explained why you often felt different even among people you loved. The sixth revealed why your heart remained generous despite what people did to you. The seventh reminded you of the inner knowing you have spent years trying to ignore. The eighth explained why your growth sometimes triggered reactions you never expected. And the ninth revealed the thread connecting everything. Your life is asking you to become useful to something greater than yourself. Maybe you already know what that means. Maybe you have absolutely no idea. Either way, do not panic. You do not need to see the entire staircase before taking the first step. Begin where you are. Use what you have. Help who you can. Learn what you need. Listen carefully. And when something inside you clearly says it is time to move, move. Because one day you may discover that the signs were never trying to convince you that destiny would simply arrive. They were trying to prepare you to meet it. And perhaps years from now, you will look back at this exact season. The confusion, the loneliness, the questions, the strange feeling that something was changing, and you will finally understand. You were not losing your life. You were losing the life that could no longer contain who you were becoming. You were not being buried. You were being planted. You were not abandoned. You were being redirected. You were not forgotten. You were being prepared. And everything you once begged to understand will begin making sense from the other side. So if these 9 signs felt strangely familiar, do not use them as an excuse to feel superior. Use them as a challenge. Become more honest, more disciplined, more compassionate, more courageous. Protect your heart without closing it. Question the world without becoming cynical. Trust your intuition without abandoning wisdom. Help people without abandoning yourself. Let rejection redirect you instead of define you. And above all, remember that purpose is not something you merely discover. It is something you live. One decision at a time. One act of courage at a time. One moment of truth at a time. Maybe your greatest chapter has not happened yet. Maybe the person you are becoming is already walking toward a future your current mind cannot imagine. Maybe the reason you survived everything behind you is because there is still something ahead of you worth surviving for. And if you have stayed with me until this moment, then take these final words with you. Do not ignore the quiet call inside you. Pay attention to the patterns. Pay attention to what repeatedly pulls at your heart. Pay attention to the doors that close and the ones that unexpectedly open. Pay attention to the lessons that keep returning until you finally learn them. And most importantly, pay attention to the person you are becoming through all of it. Because the greatest sign may not be something happening around you. The greatest sign may be the transformation happening within you. If you are still watching, you are part of this faithful family of people searching for deeper wisdom, truth, and purpose. Your support is what allows me to continue creating these videos and sharing messages that may reach someone at exactly the moment they need them. So thank you for being here. Thank you for staying until the end. And wherever you are in the world, remember this. Your story is not finished. Your hardest chapter does not have to become your final chapter. Keep walking. Keep growing. Keep listening. And when the path ahead becomes uncertain, trust that sometimes the next step is revealed only after you have the courage to take the first one. I wish you a prosperous life. May your path become clearer. May the right doors open at the right time. May you have the wisdom to recognize what is meant for you and the courage to release what is not. And may you receive beautiful and unexpected blessings today. Your journey continues now.